Thank you so much for joining us for the Educated Speaker Series. I am your host, Mr. Howard Fields, and we have an outstanding show planned for you today. Today, we are going to start with the official STEAM series. And with the STEAM series, we have two outstanding individuals here today. Those individuals we will introduce momentarily. I do want to remind everyone that you can join us using the hashtag ES series. So again, if you have any questions, if you would like to comment, again, we have some outstanding individuals here today. Please engage with us using the hashtag ES series. We will monitor this throughout today's webcast, and we will make sure we engage with you. Without further ado, we're going to introduce our first guest who's here to speak with us in regards to integrating technology. This individual is an instructional facilitator and gifted in STEAM education in St. Louis, Missouri. He has 8 years of educational experience. He is notorious for writing technology grants in the Rittner School District. That person can be no other than Mr. Michael Dragoni. Mr. Dragoni, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
As I stated before, I am so happy that we could get you here to speak with us. You're a very popular guy in social media as well as with technology. So I must pose the question, how are you integrating technology in your school district?
Sure. Let me share some slides with you. That come up okay?
Yes, sir.
Super. So I'm a huge technology dork. I play video games. I always want the latest phone, the newest laptop. And as you mentioned, I was an art teacher before I took on my current role. As an art teacher, I was pretty non-traditional. We still did all the typical art room things, but I wrote a lot of grants to get technology into my room. So we ended up doing things like, instead of just a figurative sculpture, we would do kinetic robotic sculptures with Lego robotics. Instead of depicting a landscape, we created ones that were used in stop motion films that the students would write and produce. So I do love technology and I love how it engages kids. But I think it's very important to remember that technology is just a tool. And like any other tool, if you use it improperly, it can end up causing more harm than good. For instance, it's important to remember, a lot of districts are going to one-to-one programs, be it for Chromebooks or laptops or iPads. And that's a great idea, but sticking a kid in front of a computer doesn't really change a whole lot about the essential problems in education. Too often, technology is seen as this magic bullet that's going to solve all of our issues and change everything that we do. And we've heard that, that this is the thing finally that's going to hook students and get them excited. And I think that's a very beautiful dream, but it often doesn't work out that way. So for instance, a few years back, LA school districts got some great publicity because they were going to invest a lot of money in iPads to do a one-to-one program. And the problem with that is that they were starting with the technology first instead of the instructional outcome they were hoping to address. So it's kind of like picking up a hammer and deciding that it alone will help you build a house. And that's great so long as all you're doing is pounding nails. But as soon as you need to cut something or measure something, you're kind of out of luck. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we shouldn't want technology in our classrooms. We should. Students need tech skills. They need to understand digital citizenship and how communication is truly global. But what do we want students doing with technology in the classroom? What are the instructional goals going to be? Do the teachers understand the technology they're going to be asked to use? And are they prepared to differentiate that technology? So just because you give kids a one-to-one iPad, are you ready to address the needs of the kids who are way advanced as well as the kids that are way behind? Too often, I think tech is pushed on those teachers who are not ready for it by districts who have bought into that idea that the shiny new gadget is going to motivate kids to learn the same curriculum they already have in place. And so kids, while they may like technology, they're still intrinsically motivated by the same things that motivate anyone else. the desire to have an impact on the world, to make a difference, to be respected and useful to those around us. Having a kid make a website or a Prezi doesn't do any of that. So part of that whole issue comes from the fact that kids are just used to technology. While this new tech that gets rolled out is amazing sometimes to the teachers, once the kids have grown up with this, they're the digital natives. So once the shine wears off, you still have to have engaging content and great teachers in the room. So to me, the most important thing that technology in the classroom offers us is what we are doing right now in this situation, the ability for us to interact with our peers, regardless of time and distance. For a student to be able to pull out a smartphone and work with a partner on a project, regardless of where they are, both doing research and questioning and problem solving and critiquing of one another's contributions, that is how we hope that we'll be integrating technology in our district.
Outstanding. We have some feedback already on Twitter, but I want to make sure that we are going to be able to have a conversation with you, Mr. Dragoni. If you don't mind, can you please join us at the end of the show for collaboration? Because I have a few questions already that I would like to pose with you.
Of course.
And just so all of our members will know, please follow Mr. Dragoni at Michael Dragoni on Twitter. And we are going to move on to our next outstanding guest. This particular individual has 12 years of educational experience. 7 years, the previous 7 years as an art teacher, where she was nominated for Art Teacher of the Year each and every year. And I stand corrected, she actually won. That was very important to put in the introduction. She's also responsible for implementing Apple technology in the middle school setting, as well as implementing all other types of technology in her school. Please help me welcome Miss Katie Cook. Miss Cook, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Again, thank you for correcting me. You did not just receive the nomination for 7 straight years, but you actually won. I do want to go right into the art content because, again, I consider you an expert and a guru with regards to art and some of the things you have done in your classroom and for the school. So I must pose the question, how are you helping teachers integrate art into their classroom?
This year I actually started art integration because I was at the professional development in Texas for technology implementation. I was at the Apple Art Institute and I met an art integration specialist who convinced me that not only do we need to integrate technology, but we really need to integrate the arts within all the classrooms and how they go hand in hand. Arts integration is all about getting the creative arts into the core subjects and being able to assess them on both of the standards, not only the core standards, but the art standards, and how when you teach the arts in your core subjects, you'll actually be teaching it at a deeper level. It started out with a simple PowerPoint presentation at the beginning of the year. I showed the teachers what they're already doing in their classrooms, and I showed them how they could take it to another level, but it wouldn't have happened without the permission to do such a presentation. And that permission comes with administration buy-in. You have to have your administration on board. And when you get your administration on board, you start getting the funding you need. Let's just be honest, art costs money. You have to have the funding there to not only pay for the professional development to make teachers comfortable with teaching art in their classrooms, but you need to have the materials to allow students to have their creativity reached. The funding is a big part. Being able to change your schedule. I find that a lot of teachers need time to meet with me. All too often, I'm able to only meet with the creative arts, but I need time to actually meet with the core teachers because all kids are artists. All kids have that creativity in them, but by the time teachers are adults, a lot of them have lost that creativity and they no longer want to take risks with that creativity. So once you change the schedule and teachers are able to meet with people, you just need to make sure that you keep hiring on teachers who are willing to teach the arts. I can give presentations every day, all day long, and if teachers aren't willing to allow their students the creativity in their classroom, it's not going to work. Teachers are really the backbone of it, because what we found is whenever you incorporate the arts, the kids are much more invested in their projects. We have a social studies teacher at our school who, they do history fair projects, and what we find is the students are really familiar with their projects by the end of it because they're invested in it. They've created posters, they've talked to their peers, they've interviewed people about their historical projects. They're very familiar with it. Then they go on and they present it. A big part of art is actually being able to share it with people. You can't just make art and keep it in a closet. You know, that'd be a cute project, but you're not actually getting it out there. What we've found is art actually incorporates all parts of your brain. You can do math and you'll stimulate one part. You'll do comm arts and you'll stimulate another part. But art allows you to use all of your brain. You're using problem solving at the same time that you're communicating with other people, at the same time that you're using a creative idea. We need students to be able to do this, because if our students can do it now, they'll actually take it on into the future. What we found is once they've learned this skill in the middle school, they're actually able to incorporate it as they grow up, as long as they continue doing it. It's not one thing to take an art class, but whenever you actually relate it to something you're interested in. We have students who are going to be interested in math. We have students who are going to be interested in engineering. And when you start showing them that engineering actually has to do with creative arts, you're going to get a lot more out of it. We do have the one-to-one technology at our school, and we can easily allow students the capabilities of using art in all of the classrooms. And there are simple apps that you can do. I've shown teachers that. You can have students do a see, think, wonder to begin any project. You post the picture, they see it. That's giving the students observational skills. They think about it. Now you're actually looking into the picture and using your brain to see what's going on in the picture, and then you wonder. Now we're actually inferring something that, you know, photos take 1 second of life and they make it stand still. We need our students to understand that even after that picture was taken, life happened after that, and that's starting to get our students to think about what happened after. Well, now you start taking that into a comm arts class. A story was written. What happened after the story? And when you start adding in the creativity of projects, students will start taking their thinking to another level. You get your levels of questioning. That's what art is all about. You're starting to think about things at a deeper level. You think about what happens, you know, what happens when the light turns out? What does my artwork look like if I were colorblind? You think about those questions in a regular art class. Well, now take it into a core class. Multiple times, you know, I'll hear kids talking in my classroom of, well, I don't need this. What do I need this for? What do I need to learn about shapes for? I talk about shapes as it relates to math. You have geometry. You have all of these subjects that correlate. Now what I want the core teachers to do, and what I'm trying to teach them to do, is when they're doing projects and they're teaching stuff in their class, if they allow the students to not only take an assessment where you're looking at questions in black and white, allow your students to assess their learning in a more creative way, because you'd be surprised how many students really do understand the material, but they don't necessarily understand the questions. They don't understand how to answer it in black and white. But if you allow a student to put on a play, to create a movie, to draw a picture, to draw a diagram, it's going to take it to a much deeper level. But what I also need teachers to understand, and what I made sure to stress during that presentation, is it's not about craft. It's not just about doing cutesy stuff in your class. There are art standards. And whenever you are creating these projects and you're creating these experiences in your class, you need to make sure that they are content driven. The same as you have your core standards, we have art standards. And whatever you're doing, whatever project you're allowing students to do that correlate to your content, there should be a rubric involved. When you have your rubric involved, you're going to be able to assess the student learning. You will know if they understood the material. It doesn't matter if you have it in black and white, or it doesn't matter if they've done it in theatrical versions, in a musical version, or in visual arts. All of them are going to be able to assess student learning. And once you do that, you're going to get them ready for their future. You have CEOs wanting people to be creative. You want them to be innovative. You want them to be risk takers. We wouldn't have the technology that we have today if people weren't willing to take risks. We want people to be able to be themselves. That's where the creativity comes from. And if we allow our students the chance to show off their creativity now when they're 12, 13, 14, they're going to be willing to show it off at a much later level. I have students coming in as 6th graders who they've already failed miserably in art. And I ask them in my art class, okay, how many of the worst artists do I have in my class? And we're already looking at 6th graders who are willing to raise their hand saying they're the worst artist in the world. Well, why? Because they failed at some sort of art. They failed in their craft, and they weren't allowed to try over. We have to allow students the opportunity to fail and then try again. And it's those failures that eventually they will get to find what they are successful in. So in your classes, whenever you're giving students problems, you have to give them choice. A lot of our students already know something that they're good at. They have to be able to express that to you. And that's why we do have musical arts, we have the visual arts, we have theatrical arts, we have so many ways that students are actually able to show what they're good at. We have to allow them to do that. Then once you start allowing them to take the risks, they're showing what they're good at, students are already going to start observing each other. When they start observing each other, they start observing life differently. Those observations help them in their future jobs. And even more so, they're going to start to plan more projects. The more projects they plan, the better they get at actually being able to follow through on that plan. Once you start making plans, you're able to collaborate. And as Mr. Dragori stated, this is what art is. This is what technology is. It's about collaboration. Our students, my students wouldn't be willing to take this risk. That comes with public speaking. You have to build them up to that. And that's why we need it in our classes now. And once you start adding in the arts in, our students will be unstoppable.
Wow. Excellent information. And I am very excited to get into more of the panel type of structure for this show. Before we get into the panel, again, you can ask any questions or you can comment using the hashtag ES series. So for Mr. Dragoni as well as for Ms. Cook, our first question has to do with people feeling, quote, uncomfortable. What are your suggestions for students as well as teachers who are uncomfortable with implementing art as well as technology into their lesson? Mr. Dragoni, your thoughts?
I would say that the same thing that we want to do for our students, building and district leaders want to do for their teachers, which is to create a safe environment. We need to create places where it's okay to fail. In my district, we've started calling it failing forward. You know, you're going to mess up trying something new, and that's okay. We want to see that in our classrooms. We want our students to experience it, but more so we also want to see our teachers experiencing the same thing in relationship to the feedback and the environment that they get from their building leaders.
Thank you so much. Thoughts, Ms. Cook? Same question for students and teachers who feel uncomfortable implementing art education or technology education in what they're doing, need it be science, math, ELA, etc.
Find one thing you're comfortable with. I stated earlier, there's an easy way to incorporate art into your class, and it's a see, think, wonder. Find photos that are related to your content and get students thinking about those photos before they think about your actual content, because students will, you can easily refer back to that photo, and it's going to start allowing them to make those connections in your classroom. If you don't see, think, wonder, find a few projects that you can incorporate each year that allow students the creativity. I always tell teachers, I don't want you to dive in head first, but find a few things that you can be confident that you're good at each year, and you build upon it every year then after. Because once you start, I'm telling you, once you start incorporating it and you're good at it, you'll feel more comfortable in incorporating it more and more often, and you'll even find it easier to add it into your lessons once you do it more often. But you have to start with baby steps. Find one thing you're good at the first year, decide to do it, and move on from there.
Thank you so much. Next question from Twitter. As we integrate STEAM and we continue to focus on STEAM activities, projects, etc., project-based learning becomes a big opportunity for teachers to integrate a lot of different content areas. However, how would you advise a teacher who wants to continue with project-based learning, but they would like to also include the art and the technology?
Who do you want to go first?
I've always heard the first one to speak has the loaded response.
There you go.
Okay. So I guess as far as integrating art into the general classroom, one of the things that always bothered me when I was an art teacher was when teachers would say they were integrating the arts, and what that really looked like was simply the kids who finished early were given a drawing assignment. You know, flip your paper over and draw a picture of it on the back. Art can be integrated rigorously and in ways that not only engage students, but demonstrate their learning of other content areas. I love that you mentioned project-based learning. In Rittner, there's a big push towards that right now. That's actually a major part of my job, where I will be working with grade levels of elementary teachers and students to design project-based learning units. In that model, the project-based learning model, there's a real-world problem, something non-Googleable, if that's a word, something that if a kid can Google the question and come up with an answer, it's not a good question to ask. So we give a student a real-world problem, and they have to research and investigate it, all based around the idea that they're going to have to do a public presentation at the end of their findings or their understanding of the content in some sort of creative way. We encourage that this is not a PowerPoint. It can be something they have to build. It can be done with sculpture. It can be through creating and performing a play. So in that way, the arts can be integrated as a fundamental part of cross-curricular learning.
Wow. Again, we can continue with these conversations for the rest of the night. However, I do want to get to one question in particular. Mr. Dragoni, with regards to technology, a lot of people think of money right away. You have the one-to-one initiatives, you have a lot of different things with the iPads, you have technology that will probably, when you look at this video a year from now, we won't even mention the next innovative thing. My question to you, many of our viewers may come from a district in which funding is tight. What would be your advice in terms of trying to find ways to allocate funds or locate funds so we can make sure our students are still being able to emerge as a STEAM student who wants to explore in their learning?
Sure, and I come from one of those school districts that struggles financially. We serve a very low SES population, and it was about 5 years ago I was in a meeting with all the art teachers in my building and an assistant superintendent, and a teacher asked, when are we going to get some iPads for art? And this assistant superintendent was very matter of fact and very blunt and said, I guess when you find the money, because we just don't have it. So at that point I kind of took that to heart, and I started looking for grants. And I was searching all over the place, looking nationally, and I found this organization actually located in the St. Louis area called Innovative Technology and Education Fund. And I'll send you a link to this if you want to share it. They're an organization, they give out very large grants to teachers and to schools only in the St. Louis area. In the 2-year period, they awarded me a little over $120,000 to put technology into my classroom. It's something that's feasible. It shouldn't be intimidating. They love working with teachers. And so I would say regardless of the financial ability that your district has, there are ways to get it.
Wow. Thank you so much. Again, we are starting to receive more questions, comments, etc. on Twitter, but a few things. For our viewers, again, thank you so much for joining us. If you would like to propose a particular topic for a future show, make sure you click on the link in the description below. Once you click on that description, you will have an opportunity to recommend a show, or if you would like to facilitate a show, we can make that happen as well. Speaking of future shows, we do want to give you a brief snippet of next week's show. Again, when I mention next week's show, I'm really speaking to November the 6th, and we are going to make sure we are continuing with part 2 of this series. For part 2, here's a brief clip. Again, we will continue with part 2 on November the 6th. We are off to a fantastic start with art and technology. Ms. Cook, I'm going to ask you to go first. Closing remarks for what we discussed here and just what you're thinking right now.
Incorporate what you can. Students need this. They need the opportunity to ask the higher level questions. They need the opportunity to reflect on their learning, and the arts will allow students a creative way to do that. Our students can be creative, and our students can be successful on assessments, but let's just be honest, they're not good in black and white, but our students are very good at seeing the gray, and they need to be given the opportunity to be assessed that way. They don't need to constantly be asked multiple choice questions. They need the deeper level questions. They need to prove that they have that deeper level of thinking, and they even need the chance to come up with those questions. It's not just about answering it. Art is all about asking the question and seeing if you can find an answer to it. It is the deeper questions. As Mr. Dragori said, it shouldn't be found on Google. The real life's questions you should still be asking yourself, even after you're done with your project, or even if you're done with whatever the product was that you came up with. And if our core teachers got on board with this, our students would be unstoppable.
Wow. And our tagline is for educators to collaborate, share ideas, and learn together. And 2 things you said today that really stuck out. Number 1, we use art standards every day. And thanks, Jarita Will, for really putting that out there. So I appreciate you sharing that. But also, you said we have to allow students as well as staff, give them the opportunity to fail. And I think Mr. Dragoni spoke a lot about productively failing. We call it failing forward at our school as well. So again, thank you, Ms. Cook. As we go to Mr. Dragoni, any closing remarks for tonight or what you're thinking?
Sure. I think it's conversations like these that make me very excited about the possibilities. The enthusiasm of both of you, as well as those who've been contributing on Twitter. I honestly believe the first step to making positive change is getting the right people in the room to have the conversation. And, we're in the age where that room doesn't have to be physical, it can be virtual. But either way, we start with conversation. And I'd say just thanks for including me in this one.
Absolutely. It is our complete pleasure. Just a few notes before we go into our question of the night, which again, we are going to ask for continuous participation from the Twitter world. Also, I'm going to ask that our guest today, you respond on Twitter as well. But a few things. Number 1, if you would like access to the presentation tonight by Ms. Cook, Mr. Dragoni, as well as some of the information regarding funding, I am going to receive that information and put it in the description. So later on tonight or tomorrow, you will have access to that. Again, November the 6th, we will continue with part 2, which is focusing on science and engineering. And then after that, we're going to continue with the subsequent episode. But our question of the night is as follows. How do you integrate art and technology in your school or your classroom? If you can respond using the hashtag ESSeries, we would really appreciate it. Ms. Cook as well as Mr. Dragoni will be on Twitter. And again, you can simply follow them using you can find them at Mr. Michael Dragoni on Twitter and Cooks_art. Again, Cooks_art. It has been a complete honor and privilege to facilitate learning tonight, especially when you have studs that are in the building, outstanding individuals that we have that will continue to do a great job in education. I am simply amazed at what we have going on in the educational world. Signing off right now, I told Mrs. Wise that the moment that the Cubs will make it to the World Series, I will at least acknowledge it on the show. So you got me, but I'm not going to say anything else about that. It's been a complete honor and privilege. Talk to you all later.